Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vasubanga, and today we are going to be learning about logical operators, switches, and loops. And this is going to be presented by Sai, myself, and Animesh. And so here's the schedule as normal. And today we're going to be doing logical operators, program flows, and loops. And so, today what's going to happen is Sai is going to go over the sales tax calculator. Then after that, Animesh is going to go over the operations and comparisons and the switch statements. And then I'm going to go into loops. And we're not going to be doing intro to methods. And Sai, if you'd like to take control.
So last lesson on Tuesday, we gave you this project for the sales tax calculator. So what we wanted you to do is we wanted to be able to input an item with a name and a price, and then calculate a sales tax based off of the state. So there's going to be many different ways that you could have done this, but we're going to show you one example. And as long as your code looks something similar or achieves the same output, you guys are good as well. So I'm just going to switch over and let me share my screen. So this is our solution to the sales tax calculator. We have a string for the name, we have a string for the price, and we have a Boolean that tells us whether or not we're in Michigan. And then since we only have two states, we're assuming if you're not in Michigan, meaning in Michigan is set to false, that means you're automatically in Ohio. So all we're doing is we're going through to this if statement, and we're multiplying the price times 1.06. which would be adding 6%. So if you don't know, 6% is 0.06. And then you just add that to 1 because you want to add 6%, not reduce it to just 6%. We want the total. So we get the total, and then we just print out the total and the name and just concatenate it to the string. So that's how we get a nice fancy output saying the final price for Apple is $15.90. And then if this was set to false, it would do Ohio, and we get another price. So in this case, whenever it runs, we'll get $15.86. So now back to Vasu.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so now we're going to be going on to logical operations and comparisons, and it is going to be done by Animesh. So Animesh, if you'd like to take control.
All right, so you can keep the presentation up.
Okay.
So today we're going to be going over Boolean operations, and that includes and, or, and not. But before we do that, to review from last week, I believe, is equal to and not equal to. In the bottom two rows of this table, you can see equal to and not equal to. So that's two equal signs and an exclamation point and an equal sign. So equal to allows you to check if two things have the same value, and then not equal to sees if they're not the same value. So then going on to Boolean operations. So for and, if you have two statements. If both statements are true, then it will output true. If even one of them is false, then it will output false. For or, if either one of them is true, then it will output true. Or if both of them are true, then it will put out true. And then you can use the not operator to reverse whether something is true or false. So if you have a statement that is true, you can use the not operator to make it false. So now I can show you how to do that. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So first, we're gonna do an AND operator, but before that, we need two variables. One is a string that says what day, and for now, we're gonna set that to Wednesday. Next, we're going to make an int that says hour. So that's like military time, which goes up to 24 instead of going through 1 through 12 and then 1 through 12 again. And set that to 19. Now we'll make our if statement. So if what day equals Sunday and the hour, Sunday, and, which is written with two and signs, hour is greater than 20, so it's after 8 p.m. Then we want to say system.out.println time to sleep for school. Okay. Now, we need to make an else statement just in case this doesn't run. So else, and then we'll make this a system.out.println. So I'm going to set this to Sunday and then click run. As you can see, it says else. That's because while what day does equal Sunday, the hour is not greater than 20. It's not after 8 p.m. It's only 7 p.m. So if we change this to, say, 22, which is around 10 o'clock, and then click run, now I'll say time to sleep for school. And that's because since both are true, both these statements, then this whole statement is true, and therefore this code runs. However, next, I want it to say that if it's either Sunday or Saturday, then it will say it's the weekend. So in order to do that, we do else if, and then in the parentheses, we do what day equals Sunday, and then or, which are these two vertical lines, what day equals Saturday. Then we want it to say system.out.println it's the weekend. So if we were just to click run right now, that would say time to sleep for school. That's because since this first if statement is running first and both of these conditions are met, it will print this out and then exit. So what we want to do is set hour back to 19. And then if we click run, it says it's the weekend. So now we have a little program that says if it's Sunday and after 8, then it's time to sleep for school. But if it's before 8 and either Saturday or Sunday, it will say it's the weekend. Now to finish off our program, we are going to use the not operator. So next we want to say that if it's either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, it says it's a school day. But instead of manually writing all of those else if statements, we can just write one. We can say else if not what day equals Friday, then say system.out.println it's a school day. So how this works is without this not operator, what this would say is if the day is Friday, it would print out it's a school day. But we don't want it to print that on Friday. So we put an exclamation mark, and if this is true, it will make it false. If this is false, it will make this true. So if we set this to, say, Tuesday, it says it's a school day. And one thing we don't have to worry about is Sunday or Saturday. That's because these first two else if statements will run first, and therefore we don't have to make sure that this doesn't take in Sunday or Saturday as not Friday. And then, but if it is Friday, we want to celebrate. So we can just say it's Friday in the else statement, because once it reaches here, we know that it's not Sunday or Saturday. We know it's not a school day, therefore it can only be a Friday. So if I set this to Friday and click run, it says it's Friday. So that's how you can use the operators and, which is two and signs, or, which is two vertical lines, which you press at least on Windows using Shift and the key above Enter, and the not operator, which is just an exclamation mark, which reverses whatever the statement is, whether it's true or false.
All right, so can you see? Can you see the slideshow?
Yeah, we can see
Yeah.
the slideshow.
Okay, so
Okay, so now we're going to do switch statements. So the main reason for using switch statements is it's easier to type generally for evaluating many conditions, and it's shorter than a chain of else if statements. So it's much shorter, and in the end, it looks more clean. So I'll share my screen if I can find the button. Wrong button. Can you see the screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So the anatomy of a switch statement is like this. Well, first, we're actually going to make a new string. We're going to make a string, and we're going to call it fruit, and we're going to set that to, like, grape for now. Leave that. So next is the anatomy of a switch statement. So lowercase, it's all lowercase, so it's switch. If I can spell switch right. Switch, and then parentheses, and squiggly brackets. So in the parentheses here, you put the variable that you're looking the value for. So we'll put fruit. So now so the switch statement is looking at the variable fruit. Now we need to make the first case. So that's like an else if statement. So case, and then we have to put the value that we're looking for. So in an if statement, it would be like, if this is true, then run it. But here we can look for a specific value. So I can write grape, colon, not a semicolon. Then we put the code we want to run. So in this case, we can say system.out.println this is a grape. And then there we put a semicolon. And then we have to put the break statement. This is because if you have multiple cases and no break statement, it'll just keep going to every case. It'll only stop once it reaches the end of all your cases. So this way, we can ensure that after our code runs, it will exit this switch statement. And if we want to, say, put another case, we can just say case colon system.out.println this is a apple and say break. So as you can see, we have two cases already, and we still only use one bracket. So what this means is like it's much cleaner than using all of these else if statements, because you have all these brackets and it just looks more clean. So you can add in many cases as you want, but then to end your switch statement, you want a default. So we can say default. So this is like an else statement in an if-else block. So default, we don't need a value because it will only run if the variable doesn't equal any of these values. System.out.println that is not a fruit. Put a semicolon, and then here we don't have to say break, because since this is at the bottom and this will only run if any of these are false, it'll just leave the switch statement and go on to any code we have below it, or if there's no code below it, it will terminate the program. So right now this is set to great. We can run it, and it says this is a grape. We can switch it to apple. And it says this is an apple. If we set this to pizza, it says this is not a fruit. So one upside is like you can make sure that the value is spelled exactly like this before it will run. So in the end, switch statements, it's easier to add multiple conditions to check, and it looks cleaner and it's easier to write.
Okay. Let me just share my screen real quick. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So we already learned about switch statements. So now we're going to move on to the program flow. And with that, I mean the loops. So there are two main kind of loops. There's the while loop, and it's best for running until a certain parameter is met. And normally that parameter will actually be...
But like for those of you who don't know, a loop basically lets you run a piece of code over and over again. And so loops are really important because lots of times you're going to be rerunning a bit of code. So loops are one of the key concepts of programming. So Vasi was explaining the types of loops and why you would use them. So Vasi, keep going.
Thank you, Sai. So yeah, there are going to be two main kinds of loops. There's the while loop, and it's best for running until a certain parameter is met. And normally the parameter will actually be inside of the loop itself. So the parameter will be met inside of the loop, and it's initialized like an if statement. Both these loops are sort of initialized like an if statement. And instead of writing if, you just write while, and there's no else and stuff like that. And yeah, and it keeps on running while that parameter inside of the parentheses is actually being met. The other kind of loop is a for loop, and it's best for running for a certain amount of time. Now what it does is it creates a temporary variable inside of it. It writes down the condition that it keeps running while that condition is met, and then it shows exactly how much you increment it by. So the x++ adds 1 to it every single time. And so if you just look at this code, it's going to run 10 times. And so we can just go to the repel and yeah, let's see it in action.
While statement and all, we just type in while, we put in the parentheses, and then we put in here. And here's where your parameter goes. You can put in while x is equal to true, while is Sunday is equal to true, something like that. Like you can put in over here, you could set something to while what day is not equal to Sunday, it will run today is a bad day. I don't know. You could do whatever you like here. And so here, I'm just going to go with true, because that means that it's just going to run infinitely. And so, while true will run. No, I spelled that wrong. So now we can just write something in here. We can write system.out.println. We can write this loop will run forever. And then we can run it, and we'll see that it's just gonna run forever. And yeah. Stop it. You can scroll up and you can see that it's running forever. So yeah, and there actually is a way to get out of these while loops. There's a way to get out of those while loops actually. If you type in a simple system, so you know how simple line, so you know how when you guys were learning about the switch statement, you know how there was the break thing and how that would get rid of the case. Well, we can do the exact same thing here. If we write break, it will break out of the while loop, and it will just get out of there. And so that means that since it'll run, and then it will break out of the loop. So the loop did not run forever. And so that's a little handy thing to know about this, and you guys will be most likely be using while loops or loops in general. And as I said a bit earlier, the other kind of loop is a for loop. What a for loop is, it basically runs until the condition is met and creates that temporary variable, as I said a bit ago. So you initialize it same way as an if statement, but there's something a bit different with the for loop that you always have to do. You always have to initialize a temporary variable. And so with a temporary variable, since it's not going to be there forever, we can name it just a single letter. So we can do I. And then we just set it to a value. I prefer 0 because that way you can actually, it's easier to count how many times it's actually going to run for. And then you put in a semicolon. And that's one statement that you wrote right there. After that, what you need to do is you need to write in the actual condition that the you have to write in the condition that the loop will run while that condition is there. So I is less than 10. That means that since 0, it's going to keep on running until it gets to 10. And then here, well, if it's still at 0, how is it going to get to 10? You have to increment it. And I think Joshua taught you this in either the first or second meeting, in the first or second class, actually. He taught you guys actually a little way to increment the easy way to increment your variable is using I++, or you can do I plus equal, and then you can set in a number there, and that's how much you'll increment by each time. I'm going to go with I++ because just incrementing by 1 is pretty simple. Then we can write something here, and we can just write system.out.println. This will run for, and so we see that it's 0. It starts out at 0. It's going to run. As soon as it gets to the end, it'll add on 1, so it'll go up to 1, and it keeps on going until it gets to 100, not 110. And so what? And so it'll keep on running until it gets to 10. So we can just write in this will run for 10 times. Then when you run it, I should probably comment this out so that way. Yeah. If we click run. Oh, did I?
You have to end the internet loop. You have to comment it out.
Oh,
Yeah, because otherwise it's not gonna.
okay.
Thank you.
And then I don't think it's saved, so sorry about that. So we just need to write here, this will run 10 times. And then we can run it, and it's gonna run 10 times. Hopefully.
Add your semicolon at the end.
Oh, I forgot about the semicolon. Sorry about that. And that's another thing. If you guys actually have an error, the compiler actually tries its best to help you out to find the error. So yeah, if you guys ever run into that kind of issue, that can help fix it. And going a bit slow. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And so we can change this to whatever we like. We can change it to 100 and it'll run 100 times. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to count that much. So yeah, and there are a ton of different things that you can do for this. You can make actually I'm sure you guys have heard of this, but you guys know about the arithmetic sequence, geometric sequence, like where you add on by a certain amount or when you multiply by a certain amount. There's another kind of thing called the Fibonacci sequence, and basically it's where you take the two numbers before it, you add those two numbers together, and that gets the next number, and it goes on like that. And so I'm sure most of you guys have heard about that. And so we can use the for loop exactly for that. So what we can do is we can initialize.
So one thing to add on, for those of you who don't know, the Fibonacci sequence is a sequence where you start with 1, and then you keep adding the number that came before. So I start with 1 and a 1. Then my next number, I add the two numbers before, so I get 2. Then my next number, I add 2 and 1, and I get 3. Then the next number, I add 3 and 2, and I get 5, and so on.
Yeah.
So if you didn't know, yeah.
What we can do is we can initialize the first two numbers, and those are just going to constantly be changing. We're going to initialize two numbers. And so we're going to do int num1, and we could set that to 0. And then we can do int num2, and we can set that
start at 1.
I think since they add together, then it goes back to 1, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then what we can do is we have our for loop already set up for us. And so so what we're going to do is first things first is we're going to actually show what number 1 is. So we're going to do system.out.println, and then we just show what num1 actually is. Then after that, we have to add up these two numbers together, right? So we can do something like int sum of numbers is equal to, and then num1 plus num2. Then we set number 1 to what the next number is going to be. So it's going to be number 2. Number 1 is equal to number 2. And then number 2, which is the next number, is going to be the sum of those numbers. So number 2 is equal to the sum of the numbers. And once you get those sum of the numbers, it's going to add on, and it's going to keep on repeating. So start off with 0, it's going to display 0. Then it's going to add 0 and 1. It's going to set that to 1. Number 1 is going to become 1. And then this one's going to become 1 again. And then it's going to run again. It's going to be 1, 1 plus 1, 2, number 1, then it's gonna just set this 1 again to 1, and then it's gonna set number 2 to 2, and then it's gonna add on constantly like that. And we can see it when we actually run our code. So this is gonna run for the first 10 numbers, as you can see over here. And 0, 1, 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 5, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3, and it goes on so forth, so far, so forth. And you can set to like the first 100 numbers, and yeah, it doesn't matter. You can set it to whatever you like. And so yeah, that's another really cool trick that you can do with these different for loops and these while loops and stuff like that. And yeah.
So just to show them how fast the for loop runs, can you set it to 100? Let's see how fast it runs.
All right, sure.
Well,
This will actually show the power of computing. It gets so far that that it can't even handle it anymore. You can see over here.
You see how big the numbers are. If you tried to do that by hand, it would take forever. But through code, it's done in a couple seconds.
So yeah.
okay, Vasu,
Yeah.
can we add a couple of things? Number 1, why don't you define I outside of the for loop so they understand how you can use a variable for that and not have to define it inside the for.
Yeah, so we can set up the I value outside of it, and then you'll actually be able to access I outside of the for loop itself.
Okay, yeah, get rid of the int, yep. So like that's an efficient way to do it because you only define I once if you're gonna use it multiple times. All right, and the second thing is inside your loop, why don't you go ahead and show what I is every time you print off numbers so you get the idea that it is iterating through.
So if we just comment out the Fibonacci sequence, then it'll be easier to see it. And so yeah, even if you initialize I within the for loop, it still exists within the for loop. So you'll actually be able to see it. So if we just do system.out.println, and we can show exactly what I is. Not like that. So we just type in I and just click run, and oh, it's gonna run for 100 times.
It's okay.
Yeah. And did it run? Oh yeah, it did. So you can see it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it goes on until 99 because it's less than 100, not exactly 100.
Excellent, good job.
Are there any questions? Because I know it's a confusing topic. No questions?
For loops are pretty important. So
yeah, for loops are going to be really important.
If you're scanning this, please ask now because you'll see for loops or do while or when loops or whatever for a long, long, long time. This is one of the fundamental things in programming. Does everybody understand this? Crickets. I hear crickets. Do you hear any crickets?
Yeah, I hear them.
Okay, cool.
So we have a question from Anshul. Anshul.
Can you go back to the code?
If you click the link in chat, you'll be able to get to there.
Okay,
I'll send it again.
Also, if you have to increment by 5, how do you do that?
So here, I'll go back to there.
So in your last condition, you can increment by whatever you want. So ++ is just a shortcut to increment by 1, but you can also do + = 5.
Okay, thank you.
So that's another short way in order to add it.
Yeah, the I++ is just a shortcut, okay? That would be the same thing as I + = 1.
Which is the same thing as I = I + 1.
Right.
So it's all just like a shorthand.
Yep.
if you were to write out the longest way, it would be I equals I plus, and then like that. And who wants to write that? So you can just do I plus equal 5, I plus plus, stuff like that.
It's a good question. So are there any more questions like that?
No question? Okay. So then, Sai, do you want to give the challenge, or is there anything else that we need to cover?
Not. So one thing I'd like you to that you guys should remember is that you can do anything you want inside of a loop, right? So it doesn't have to be just doing math. You can put loops inside of loops. You can put an if statement inside of a loop. You can do whatever you want, right? So like, for example, we can, as an example, we can here. As an example, we can decide if numbers are prime or not, right? So this is just an example of using a loop, of using an if statement inside of a loop, or not prime, but even or not. So if I want to do for I equals 0, because we have to reset it from before, and I less than 100, and then I plus plus. This is going to run through the first 100 numbers, right? So I can do if I modulus 2. So all modulus does is it gives you the remainder, right? So if your number is even and you divide by 2, you're going to get a 0. So if I modulus 2 is equal to 0, then we can say system out.println I is even, else out.println I is odd. Right, so if we run this, we are going to get even and odd, right? So again, it's deciding whether or not it's even and odd based off of for loop, based off an if statement inside the for loop. So it's just another thing to keep in mind that anything inside a loop there's nothing special about it. You can put any other statements just like you would inside the main body of your code. So I think that's something that some people get confused on, is if there's anything special about what you can do, what you can and cannot do inside a loop. And the answer is you can do anything you want inside a loop, just like you can do anything you want inside an if statement. So are there any questions on that? So to leave you guys off for today, we prepared another project for you guys to try. Just go to the end. Here. So what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to make a prime number calculator. So we just want to give you a number. You just want to be able to type in a number into a variable, and then we want the program to tell us whether or not it's prime or not. Right? So to do this, you're probably going to need to use a loop, and you're probably going to want to use the modulus operator, which will tell you the remainder. And so just as a recap, prime numbers are any number that can't be divided by, that can only be divided by 1 and itself, right? So if I take the number 7 and I try and divide it by 6, you're going to get a remainder. By 5, you get a remainder. By 4, you get a remainder. By 3, you get a remainder, and so on. So the only numbers that can divide 7 are 7 and 1. So numbers like that are called prime, and we want you to figure out whether or not a given number is prime as your challenge. So are there any questions on loops, on anything we taught you today? There are no questions? So if there are no questions, that we're pretty much done for today. See you at the team meeting.
Yep, we'll see you then.
All right.